This is a short video to introduce you to the various controls you have over how this motion chart displays data. The first thing to notice is that this is an animatable scatter plot. So each bubble here represents a scenario, and you can see which scenario it is by hovering over the bubble. And this slider controls the movement of these bubbles through time. You can play the evolution with the play button, pause it at any point, and drag the slider to get to a desired year. The X and Y axes can be changed using these drop-down menus. What I've put on here are electricity generation, with the abbreviation EPROD, electricity production, from several different plant types: coal with CCS, existing coal, new gas, existing gas, hydro, nuclear, solar, wind, and biomass, along with 3 types of emissions. The one here called ELEC-EMI is CO2 emissions, and we also have mercury and SO2. So you can just use this menu to change and look at a different type of emission, or to scatter 2 different types of generation against each other. And the same with this one here. Then you have 2 additional controls to change the way these bubbles appear to give you more information. The first is the size, which can also be set to be any of the variables. So right now you can see I've got redundant information because I'm using both the size and the y-axis for gas new, and so all the bubbles down near the bottom are small and all the bubbles up near the top are big. So when I originally set up this graph with emissions on the y-axis and coal on the x-axis, I also set the size to new gas because, as we saw before, the amount of new gas is really a good proxy for seeing whether there is energy efficiency, yes or no, in the scenario. And I can show you that by using this last control here, which allows you to color the bubbles in various ways. And so again, we can color by each of the variables here. So for example, if I want to look at old gas, now the bubbles are all being colored according to whether they have a small amount of old gas, the dark blue scenarios, or a larger amount of new gas in the brighter yellow scenarios. There's another set of colorings down here, the SEN-G for scenario group, which color the bubbles according to the choices that we've made about different scenario dimensions in each of the runs. So for example, if I color according to the first one, 111D trade, I've got 5 different colors: the no trade scenarios, the average trade scenarios, and the yes scenarios, along with an X for the base scenario and a dash for the low shale, no policy scenario. So you can do that for each of the scenario dimensions. And so if we scroll down to the bottom and find state EE, we can see that all of these small bubbles down here are the EE scenarios that have a small amount of new gas, and all of the larger bubbles are the ones that have a larger amount of new gas because the load is just higher, the load growth is higher. So I find that using new gas as the size is a nice way to help me keep track of whether I'm looking at EES or EE no scenarios, regardless of how I have the other dimensions set up. The 2 special colorings here under SEN-G are the ones that combine different scenario dimensions. We've got one that combines TCB, trade, the treatment of combined cycle, and the basis. Those are our 3 policy design dimensions. And then one NSE for nuclear, shale, and energy efficiency accomplishment, which are our state of the world uncertainties. And so coloring by those gives us a view of how the scenarios are grouped under those 3 dimensions at a time. Now you'll see that sometimes this list here is too short to display the entire legend. And if that happens, you can reset that spacing by clicking into the line chart, and that'll draw you the whole legend, and then you can click back into the bubbles and reset the time to whatever year you want to be looking at. So this code here, NSE, is your guide for what these legends mean. So the first letter is nuclear, then shale, and then EE. So these medium blue bubbles here Nuclear, no. Low shale resource, meaning high gas prices, and no energy efficiency accomplishment. And similarly for the TCB coloring. So these ones here are no trade, new combined cycle is not included in the constraint, and a rate basis. Now, another thing you can do when you're playing the scenarios is track specific ones. And it can be easier to see all the scenarios if I set the size to be the same size. Now they're quite a bit smaller and you can see them all. So if I want to see, for example, what's going on with this scenario and this scenario, I can select them. And then when I play them over time, I will see trails that show tracking just how the evolution of that scenario, those two scenarios, are taking place in time. When you're done tracking particular scenarios, you can reset the display by clicking Deselect All here. So that's what you can do on the motion chart. There's two other charts here that might be of interest. The column chart shows you the values for just one variable, sorted by whichever variable is on the x-axis. So now I've sorted all the scenarios by their CO2 emissions, and we can see that the low shale, no policy case is the highest emission, followed by the base case, but then we can see all of the scenarios according to their emissions. And again, we can use the coloring to see how do the various trade types affect the emissions. The line charts here, again, track only one variable, but in this case, they show you the time evolution of that variable. And so you can see this sort of spaghetti graph of all 82 scenarios, how they're evolving over in time. And again, you've got the same coloring controls here, and you can hover over them to see those scenarios light up. So those are the controls for using the motion chart. For more information about the FACETS model, to see examples of analyses we've done and find some motion charts that you can explore, visit our website at facets-model.com.